Hi, everyone.
Okay, awesome. Hey, everyone. I hope you're having a great time at RevCon so far. I'm Anna Abbott. I am the head of community here at Rev Genius, and I am so excited to introduce our next speakers. They have some awesome things to speak to you about. We have Olga Karanikos, Dana Mirabella, and Emily Anderson here to speak to all of you today. And this is all about managing up. And what the title says is not about playing politics, which I'm so interested to learn about from all of you. So if you three lovely ladies would like to take it away, I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna. I'm going to start sharing a screen now just because it helps to keep everybody looking at something other than our faces. It is the afternoon in the US. It's pretty late for Amelia in Norway. So it'll help you the screen and don't worry about us so much. So here we go. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So let me hit the slide. All right. So like we said, we're talking about managing up today and telling you a little bit about what it is and that it's really just so much more than playing politics. And it's a success hack for your career, for your current job, helps in so many ways. As you can see, I'm joined by two of my colleagues here, Dana and Amelia. We are all from SalesScreen. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit. And I will say that we're pretty happy to announce that Dana actually got promoted this week. So you may have seen in our promos that she was our VP of Customer Success and now is our CRO. So congrats to Dana.
Congrats. I think we lost Dana. I think her connection is a bit unstable, but I can start by introducing myself. I'm Amelia. I'm the VP of People Operations here in SalesScreen, based in Oslo, but work globally for all our teams worldwide. So yeah, fortunate enough to sit in the management team with Olga and Dana.
Great. And I'm Olga. I'm our VP of Marketing. I joined SalesScreen in December, so I'm just about to hit a year. Absolutely loving our team here and what we do. And we're happy to talk to you guys a little bit from our management team experience, but we definitely want to keep all of this conversational too. So very happy for you all to point into the chat, ask questions along the way, and keep this as conversational as possible. I will say right now, I cannot see anything other than the presentation. So Amelia, I'm going to ask you to watch the chat and tell me what's going on with Dana.
I am going to watch the chat. So I don't know what's going on with Dana, but I guess we can kick it off.
Yeah. So also to give you guys an idea of where we're coming from and what SalesScreen is, if you're not familiar with our company, we do sales gamification, and it's a platform which essentially motivates sellers to achieve their goals. Simple as that. We harness the psychology the gaming and exercise industry has kind of figured out as far as keeping players hooked and apply it to business. So if you have any questions about that, please chat us in our booth and let us know, and we're happy to tell you more about what we do. But right now, we're not here to tell you about our company. We're here to talk about managing up. So we're going to kind of move over to that and start with some just questions. And again, this is guiding a conversation. We'll talk about our points of view, but happy to take any questions from the crowd.
And she's back just in time.
I am on conference calls all day. The fact that it's not working now is just my luck. So I apologize.
All right. So we'll kick it off with our first
I don't know if that's going to work.
What's the perception of managing up and what does it actually mean?
Okay. So let me know if you guys can't hear me all of a sudden. I'm so sorry. So I think, the title of this really says it all. So many people think it's politics. And like, what does that mean in the professional setting, right? Like you think it's sucking up, you think it's self-serving, it's manipulating your boss to get what you want. But the fact is that managing up like really aren't dirty words. Like when it's well done, it makes your manager's job easier. It makes your job easier. And more importantly, you're setting yourself up for success, right? Like I always tell my team, I don't know what you want in your career, and you're your biggest advocate. So when you think about it in reality, I really need to understand like the day-to-day of what's going on, the interactions. And even if you're an executive, like you're never done managing up, right? You manage up to either the CEO, in my case, the board. So this never ends within your career. And I think like the most important thing.
She's out.
And right at the most important thing.
Yeah. Now it definitely like lean into what Dana said about like managing up is definitely setting yourself up for success, like not
For that mutual
necessarily
benefit between.
not necessarily only in the way of like focusing on a promotion or to be better or a league against like your colleagues, but like more in the way of managing your interactions with your higher ups, right? And like framing a positive network or positive working relationship towards like mutual benefits. So like I would say developing and cultivating like a productive communication style with your higher ups. I think like it was Culture Amp, I think like that they had like a one-liner, like what does actually managing up means. And they said managing up is about using the traits of a good manager to help bring out the best in you as an employee to create a positive, efficient, and productive working relationship, which I think summarizes it pretty well.
Yeah, that definitely says it all.
Yeah, so I think like we've discussed a bit like what it means, but like what do you think is the value in managing up when it comes to you?
I mean, to me, it's and we kind of talked about the mutual benefit, right? And that speaks to so many things. It's mutual respect. So if you know what your manager is expecting, they know what you're expecting of them, you really lay the groundwork for a solid relationship and you can have that mutual respect. But it's also managing expectations at the end of the day, right? Like not all of it is just the feel good around having a relationship with your boss, but it's also really understanding what those expectations are, talking about it consistently, making sure that you are doing things that you think you should be doing, but always keeping sort of those North Star goals of what your manager is expecting of you is huge. So it can help keep you on track to like your team goals, but then also your company goals. So all of that just really sets you up to show strong value. And you always want to be that person on your manager's team that they see a lot of value, great output coming out of you. You know, you're not just completing projects, but you're really offering solutions to your team. And then one of the key things that we talk a lot about at SalesScreen, which is a major issue, as we all know, over the past couple of years, is just preventing burnout. And if you're successfully managing up, it's really a great way to prevent burnout. So if you're an individual contributor, you know, you're kind of working solely, you're not managing anyone, you can use your manager to hack that burnout, you know, and make sure that you're not at that point. Ensure that you've got an appropriate workload. So that's kind of communicating consistently. Hey, I absolutely want to complete that project. It might put me above my threshold this week. Like, what's the priority? And as a manager, that's something that I find super valuable because the last thing you want is an employee feeling like they're overwhelmed. But of course, as an individual contributor, you want to be sure that you're always challenged just enough without getting to that burnout point that you're like so overwhelmed. And of course, autonomy. So you want to be able to do your job on your own terms and just come back with like your output, and it should speak for itself. And that always helps with burnout, right? If you've got that manager that's micromanaging you, that never feels good. So if you can successfully manage up and communicate with your manager of like, hey, I've got this. I'll come to you if I've got questions. I'll come to you if I need support. It really puts you in a position to only be coming back with value. And I think from a manager standpoint, we talk a lot about, you know, practicing vulnerability. there's a lot of discussion out there about leading with empathy, but take it one step further. You know, we've all been put at home in these like crazy work situations. And so like really sharing your daily struggle as a leader is a great way to get everybody on a level playing field. And that allows people to manage up effectively to you. You don't want to feel out of reach. You don't want to feel like, hey, I don't want to talk about anything personal ever. You know, you want to be approachable. So all of these things really help towards ensuring that you're not going to hit that burnout stage. Anything you'd add, Amelia? What else do you think?
No, I think like there's definitely plenty of good points. I think like if you as an individual like feel like you're working efficiently, like communicating well with your manager and doing your job well, that will make your life easier, and you will feel more happy about work and fulfilled in your job and your day-to-day life, which of course again helps prevent the burnout. So and yeah, of course, like if you want to advance in your career as well, like the value of managing up towards your manager, like the biggest ace you can have up your sleeve is your manager, right? So
yeah. And it's also just not your direct manager, right? So that's the other layer to all of this stuff. There's definitely an area where you want to know your manager the best and really focus on their communication style. But depending on your size of company, like if it's a small company, you're really managing up to all managers, right? You're pretty visible across multiple teams. So there's sort of a lot that you can do to make sure that you're managing successfully sort of across the board for your management team.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like aligning yourself to company goals and showing the value across leaders is a big success factor. And like aligning yourself to multiple key stakeholders, like you probably would, like in a sales process, you need different stakeholders to want to buy your product. It's kind of the same. Like you want different people in your court, not just your direct manager. And I think like, especially if you're a female working in sales and or tech, like it can be tough to advance. And then again, having multiple people in or on your court side, it's definitely valuable.
Yeah. It's funny because you talked about like the multiple people, right? And for sales and having multiple stakeholders, like that's multi-threading, right? So if you're in sales and you know exactly what that is, and you're constantly pushed by your team to do that when you're looking at a deal, I mean, think of it the same way when you're managing up. You want to have multiple conversations going effectively with all your different stakeholders in your company.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So that kind of moves us on to, all right, now we've kind of laid the groundwork for what is managing up, what's the value in it. Hopefully we are selling you a little bit on the idea of really focusing on this, but it definitely changes from person to person. So let's talk a little bit about how managing up changes from one manager to the other, or even changes with workplace culture.
I'm back. I can hop in. I love the chat too. Someone asked if I had Comcast, which for those of you out on Long Island, I do. So very technical hack of unplug, replug, and hopefully I'm back in action. So I think for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my career is that you have to play to the person's personality, and everybody likes to be approached differently. So for me, I'm definitely more of a storyteller. So I want someone to come and tell me like, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I did. Here was the outcome. Here's what I could have learned. And I like love that. Where if you send me a spreadsheet or expect me to look at a spreadsheet on the spot in a one-on-one, it's much harder for me to analyze the data in real time. And that's not to say I'm not a data person. Obviously in this job, I have to look at data, but the way to like approach me, you know, when you're trying to manage up specifically for me is to think about like, tell me the story, right? Tell me what you did. Let me see the whole picture from start to finish. And I think the other thing that I always encourage my team, and I encourage all of you, is like figure out what that person's threshold is for venting, right? Because sometimes when you are coming, you know, to the table, there may be an issue or a challenge that you're trying to solve. And some managers like really want you to focus on the solution and not really the venting part of it. Where for me, you know, I always say like, hey, listen, if you open up the conversation and say, hey, I need to vent, and some of what I say may be unprofessional, but I really need your coaching here, I'm totally open to kind of like the BS that might happen. But not everyone is like that. So thinking about what your personality is versus what your manager's personality is, and how you shift or adjust that, I think is really important in a lot of situations for sure. I'm going to let Amelia kind of talk about the culture piece of it. And I think her perspective has been really interesting, especially for me, like being based in the US with most of my team in Europe. There definitely are cultural differences that I've had to be awakened to for sure.
Yeah, no, I think like what you said with like different managers, it's the same with cultures. Like everywhere you're going to work, it's going to be a different working culture. And I think we've seen that when SalesScreen expanded to the US and you guys come along to like the management team and everything, and the way of managing that you were kind of used to in your other job, it's different. We're a Norwegian founded company. It's more of the Scandinavian working culture here. So it's definitely interesting to see the different cultures falling into place and having to adapt to each other. And like with especially our team, Dana, and most of them are here, and they were used to a Norwegian manager who had a very different working style than what you have. It was definitely interesting to see, and I think they all adapted fairly quickly and pretty well also. But it was interesting to see, and I can speak for myself as well. Like as you mentioned, with some managers being numbers people, some being more relationship driven. I report to the CFO of the company, and I work with people. Like we have a different perspective of the business and how we communicate and the way to go about business objectives in meetings. So we definitely had to find a way of communicating together and setting like his expectations to me, and what he needed me to bring was a lot different than what I'm used to as well. But I feel when you're coming to that middle ground and you kind of crack the code of the business objectives and your manager's working style, it's very valuable to the company, and cracking the code with culture as well. It's key for the business to move forward, I would say.
Yeah. It's funny when I said to our CEO that we were doing this session, he was like, what is managing up? Because in Europe, and especially in Scandinavian countries, like that kind of concept doesn't exist. It's much more flat, very little hierarchy as opposed to the US. And I find that so interesting because it's a great way to think about all of these topics. Like it doesn't always need to be about managing up, whoever you report to and creating that hierarchy. A lot of this just happens with your colleagues too. It's managing all types of communication styles, all types of cultures. So it's so much more than just thinking about leadership. So if you're in a flat org or you're working on like a massive team structure that you're more interfacing with like your colleagues versus your managers, a lot of this stuff still applies.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and with all that comes to that. And that means like your communication style, your working style will have to adapt over time, given the manager that you have, the culture that you work in, the type of people you work with, but also like on a personal basis. Like you always have to adapt.
Yeah. Great. All right. So shifting gears a little bit more towards, again, like the value in managing up. Let's talk a little bit about how it can help in your career. So I think, a key thing to think about is really about making your current situation your own. Like if you're looking for more responsibility or a promotion, the best way to achieve those goals is really thinking through how to successfully walk that out with your manager. Maybe you've got someone like Dana, who's your manager, who's extremely communicative and open, and you can go to her and say, this is my goal, and this is exactly what I want. And that's great. And she'll probably help you work through that. If you have maybe a manager who's much more hierarchical or not always available, how do you hack that? How do you really think that through? Like maybe you come to your one-on-ones with, this week I provided this value towards this ultimate goal. And that really starts to put you in that manager's mindset of, hey, he or she really gets it, and he or she can really level up in their career. So I think a lot of it is sort of like hacking that next step to your promotion. But if it's not this job, it's another one, so lock in your reference and never burn a bridge. So find a way to find that common ground with your manager so that you ensure they have only great things to say about you for that day that you do leave this current company.
Yeah. And Olga, Nick had a question here about sales and just, like what does this model work in, are there any industries where this model works better? And I think the really unique thing about the three of us is that we all come from different industries. And I'm not saying that this is like a model where every point that we're saying will, help you in every industry, but you could definitely take small pieces here and there. So my background is mostly in ad tech or martech, and now I'm in like sales gamification, which also to Nick's point is super competitive. And, it's harder to hide behind like, hey, I'm not performing, especially in like a sales role where you have numbers. Like, how do you show that type of promotion or kind of managing up when your numbers suck, right? Like, this is really hard. And for most of you on this call, you're in sales or some type of, numbers oriented role. And I think it is hard, but it's not impossible. And I almost think when you're not performing in a numbers centric role, managing up is even more important. Like, don't let the numbers dictate your performance. Maybe there's something that your manager just doesn't know. And this is where you need to manage up, right? Where maybe you are in a territory that's really feeling the economic downturn more, or they're, more afraid to pull the trigger, or, you're not seeing as many leads, or you have like 2 huge deals in your pipeline that are sucking up all your time where it doesn't look like you're performing, but you actually have a very strong pipeline for the next quarter, right? And maybe that will blow it out of the park. But your manager doesn't know those things unless you figure out a way to manage up. And I think that's where like the transparency really does come through, is call the elephant out. And I use that term all the time. I call it a pink elephant, which someone once told me it's just an elephant. It doesn't have to be pink, but in my world, it's pink. Like, hey, I'm going to call out the pink elephant in the room. My numbers aren't where I want them to be. Here's why. Here's where I need coaching. Like, please help me understand that. And I actually find it refreshing when someone does that, because you know that they want to be better, right? That's where you can coach them and you see the potential or the strive in that person to want to do better. So don't let the numbers scare you in those competitive environments. Own it, call the pink elephant out in the room. And then, industry wide, I'm sure there's some things that could be there. Like I said, I came from ad tech, martech, Olga can kind of give some experience, and so can Amelia. Like, it's all different, but it does tie together. So like, remember, it's personal for you, and take whatever you think is going to work. Don't let the job performance or the industry you're in scare you from having these type of conversations.
Yeah. And I would just add to that too. Like, if you're in a numbers driven role, you're in sales, you've got your ultimate quarterly goals or even monthly, whatever it may be. Great points that Dana brings up. But another way to kind of hack that along the way is like, show the effort you're putting in. So if you know what your monthly or quarterly goal is, and you're like, all right, I don't see it in my pipeline, so I'm going to increase the number of cold calls, or I'm going to increase the number of touch points, or I'm really going to work on my sequences, like, communicate that to your manager. And that's a great way to manage up, to say, like, I'm putting in the effort. Something's not working. I need some coaching. But that's a great way to come in a solution oriented way to your manager versus just like, oh, I don't know what to do. So show the steps that you're taking. And then you can even show small wins, like maybe this week you made X number of cold calls more than last week. So you're like, I'm driving my numbers up, or I'm on a streak to hitting more discos, but they're not converting. So show your awareness of the process. And that's a great way to show that you're really like, leveling the playing field across between you and your manager of, I'm trying, I just might need some coaching.
Yeah. We're happy to take any questions in there. I am looking at it. So thanks, Nick, for being the first one to throw one in there. Shifting gears a little bit, and we'd love for you guys to put this in the chat as well, but we thought we'd start to talk about like some of our biggest managing up fails, because it hasn't been rainbows and butterflies. There's definitely been some whoopsie daisies in there, I'm sure, for all of you. So I will go first and rip the Band-Aid off. But I was in a manager role at a larger organization. I'm kind of a startup junkie. So, figuring out how to navigate all those levels was definitely hard for me. And I remember feeling so prepared for every one-on-one, right? Like, I had a spreadsheet and it had the date and the topics I wanted to talk about. and all of the things that I was accomplishing that week, that month, or even that quarter, right? Like really thinking that I was putting out like the value I was providing to the organization through the project work that I was doing. Well, like 2 quarters into me thinking I'm like rocking my one-on-ones, I'm managing up so well, I'm giving my boss all the information that she needs, and I'm looking really good. I get like a slap in the face one day where it's like, hey, Dana, this is not effective. I was like, what do you mean this is not effective? This is just a laundry list of all the tasks that you're doing. I don't find it valuable. You're just patting yourself on the back. It's like you're checking a box and moving on. It's so not strategic. I was devastated to say the least. But what I did learn from that meeting is I never checked with her. I never said, hey, is this format working for you? I think I'm providing this, are we aligned? Is there a better way for me to do this? Instead, I just like walked in and walked out feeling like that was a great meeting. It was awesome. So when she like said to me, hey, this isn't strategic, and it actually came up like in my performance reviews, like no strategic thinking, I was like, oh my God, this is the worst feedback ever. But it really was just a quick shift, and it could have been avoided if I just like took a breath and said, hey, this is what I think I'm providing in these meetings. Is this the structure you like? Are you seeing the same value that I think I'm bringing to the organization? So that gut check would have really helped for me instead of what she perceived to be a laundry list and I perceived to be all the value I was bringing week over week. So, there little things like that can go such a long way. And when something like that type of feedback happens, again, don't let it discourage you. It's probably a small fix. It doesn't mean that you're not great at your job. It just means that you're probably miscommunicating some of the tasks that you're doing to your manager. Olga or Amelia, you want to share? Nobody's sharing in the chat yet.
I want to comment on that because that also shows the difference between managers, because I was listening to this podcast and this guy was talking about like the things he was doing to manage up in his current company. And one thing that he found was like truly valuable was to send like Tom's check-in or like weekly to-dos to his manager. And that worked very well for him, and it was a laundry list of his to-dos. So
yep.
It's all about the style, right? And knowing what theirs is. Yeah, I'll add I think one major lesson that I learned is just transparency is always so key. Like if you're in a marketing role and you know how campaign launches go, there's 75 moving pieces. Like I was setting myself up for a major campaign. We had everything lined up. Everything was kind of moving. We already got the booth at the one conference. We had the sequences for the SDRs team. Like we had so many things in place. And all of a sudden I realized, the one launch email to one target group wasn't set up yet. And so I was like, no one will notice. Like, it's fine. And I had a boss who tended to want to see kind of all the actions, all the deliverable dates, and really take a look at everything. And I was like, what are the chances that he's not going to realize that we send it a couple days later? So I confirmed campaign's good to go. Everything's launching. Can't wait to see the results. And he's like, what about that one email? And literally went into HubSpot, which I didn't even know he had a login, and saw that email didn't launch. So not only did I get caught in a lie, which is never a good place to be. So that's the major number one, don't do. I just never really sat down to talk to him to understand, what are the key things that you want out of this campaign? What are the key deliverables? What are the key results that you want to see? Had I done that, I would have known, he particularly was very curious about that one target group and thought that direct email was going to be a major action item, and it was off my radar. So I think it's just a lot of communication, transparency, all of these kinds of things help to prevent those situations. And I will never do that again. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a definite communication mess up from my side, from his side. I don't know who to blame there, but within the line. So it was me. It's in my current job that I have with my current manager, CFO. We were walking into a meeting. We had talked about me doing this project for the company. It was kind of a bigger project. in my opinion, or in my mind, I was going into that meeting to brainstorm with him what this would be. In his perception, he expected me to have almost finished the product. So he wanted an actual delivery in that meeting. And it was not delivered. And he basically had to do the whole project with me in that meeting. So yeah. I'm not now more aligned with like, what do you expect of me before this meeting? What do you want out of this? So definitely. And that was 2 years in as well with us working together. So you can still have the miscommunication, I think, when you don't align well.
No, that's such a good one though. And I tend to forget that step, but it's such a key step. Hey, my one-on-one is coming, or hey, we're meeting about this project. And this could be a team meeting too. You know, what's on the agenda? And we try so hard in our company to like agenda out every meeting and, you know, send it in advance and all this kind of stuff. But it helps so much in those kind of miscommunications and just really tagging someone in it. Like, hey, you're meant to come with this deliverable, or checking in with your boss. Like, what's the expectation for like the goal of this meeting? It just helps so much. All right. So we've gone through our fails. So let's kind of share through the things we've learned. So what are our do's and don'ts?
Yeah, we didn't get anyone sending in their worst managing up fails.
No.
Only us embarrassing ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mill, you want to walk us through these?
Yes. The do's and the don'ts. Let's start. Where do you want to start? The do's or the don'ts? Where do we want to end up?
Let's go with don'ts. We'll start with the bad and move to the good.
I agree. Good strategy. So we put 3 don'ts. Number 1, don't play managers against each other. And I think maybe Olga can deep dive maybe a bit more into what we mean about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is definitely, if you're in a role that, like, let's say your leader is the revenue leader. I'm going to pick on Dana, who's now my boss. You know, Dana's going to have multiple people reporting into her from different functions between marketing and customer success and sales. And so all of us leaders on her team kind of feel like all of our ICs are working with each other, right? So anybody in the sales team, like, I should be able to understand what they're doing. They should be able to communicate with me. The last thing Dana wants to see is that she's hearing from an IC one thing about the marketing leader or one thing about the CS leader. And it's, you know, trying to get those people playing off each other. So the idea here is just like, be as communicative as possible. And if you have some sort of like, I don't know, rough situation with the manager, like, call it out or go to another manager for help and just be very honest about the scenarios. Don't ever go and be like, hey, so-and-so said this. And, you know, it always just sets things off on a bad foot.
Good. Then we have, don't try to cover up mistakes. I think that goes very well back to your story, Olga. Just be honest, just be transparent. Like, I think everyone makes mistakes. It's human, it's natural. I don't think there's any point of covering anything up. Like, most likely it's going to be, people are going to notice anyway. So yeah. And then number 3, we have a Dana story. Don't share your laundry list of to-dos. Anything you want to add on that point?
No, I mean, I think you guys can all learn from my lesson. But really the don'ts, I think, sum it up to like, remember there's larger business outcomes that like your manager or your peer is thinking about. And I think the more you can tie it to that business, you know, outcome or decision when you're thinking about these type of conversations, like, that's always a safe bet. And that will help you avoid some of these don'ts for sure.
Good. Now, bridging over to the do's. As we talked a lot about today, it's learning your manager's communication style and what works for them, aligning yourself with their goals to your goals. Any add-ons to the things that we said today?
I would say just ask. Like I value anybody who comes to me and says like, what's your communication style? What's the best way I can, make a one-on-one successful? I think there's no shame in that. Just coming specifically, just say, hey, I want to manage up successfully. Like that's totally fine.
Call the pink elephant out. Let them know what you're trying to do, right? Like I think the biggest thing here, and even going into like the second point a little bit, is like you're your biggest advocate no matter what. And, hopefully everyone works for a manager that you feel supports you. But I'm never going to support anyone on my team the way they're going to support themselves. I just don't know what I don't know, right? So like learning that style and figuring out how to get your points across, I think are so important for your own career, right? Whether you're struggling and you want to grow, or you are working towards that promotion, or you just want to figure out the best way to, focus on what you're providing. It is like such an important thing to think about. Like, why not just be upfront about it? Hey, what is the best way for me to manage up to you and make sure you know what I'm doing, right? And that you feel that what I'm doing every day are the right things for the business outcome that you're trying to drive for my team. That's like amazing, right? I would love if everyone on my team said that to me, rather than, hey, I don't really agree with my performance review, or hey, I'm not sure I really get that comment. It's like, well, if you would have, like, tell me why, tell me what you're trying to do, right? Like, don't be so wishy-washy, like own your career, I think is what we're really trying to get across here, and own your mistakes, right? Like that's where you learn and where you show that you're learning. And that is amazing for your manager or your peers to hear as well.
Yeah. I think it's also like bridges into like focus on the value in your work as well. Goes into point number 2, I would say.
Yeah. So if we wrap it all up, what we're going to say our top tips is, again, share value. We can't bring this across strong enough. Like as managers, what we always want to see is also that our team members are seeing the bigger picture. So if you can bring value to the table in all your conversations, and that doesn't always have to be metrics or numbers or, hey, I hit my goal. It's I'm thinking about a solution. I'm coming to you with a problem, but here are some options I'm thinking about. Like always come solution-oriented, value-oriented, and you're going to get so much more from that relationship with your manager as well. And same with other managers, or anybody from the leadership team might really start to like see you because they're like, oh, all right, that one person in CS, they're really thinking through some options for the whole revenue team. Like that's an excellent place to be. So always show the bigger picture and the value in what you're doing. Adapt to your communication styles for sure. Like make sure you're actually sitting down and assessing, like take the time to think through, hey, what does my manager like? What they don't like? Maybe I want to ask some clarifying questions. We talked about the pink elephant, just call it out. Hey, I want to learn what your style is. Like, that's great. Be honest and ask how to best communicate, and be your best advocate. You're the one who's going to look out for your promotion, that's going to look out for wanting to get more responsibility or wanting to get some help to take some things off your plate. You really need to come and communicate it. You can't assume that your manager is seeing things. Track and share your own metrics and, ask for things. And one of the things we didn't touch on too much in our talk here, but that's pretty obvious, is we're all females. And one of the things you tend to find with females, and especially in the tech industry, females are not as great about coming and advocating for themselves and showing their worth and really asking for what they want. So we would definitely encourage females to do that. Bring it to the table, be solution oriented and share that value. And it's much more likely that your boss is going to be very bought into what you're asking for and what you're talking about. Anything you ladies would add to those?
I think you summed it up so nicely.
Yes, I agree. Don't want to mess it up.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see your faces now. But curious if there are any questions from the crowd.
Nothing in the chat. There's a lot of places you could add questions, so I'm checking them all. I don't see any. Maybe we'll give everyone a couple more seconds. If not, give everyone the 4 minutes back between sessions.
Oh, we have some Europeans in the chat. That's nice.
All right. We got a question?
Yeah. I think Kim has a question. I don't know. we didn't ask if you guys can say it out loud or if you have to type it in. So, I mean, Tim, if you want to unmute, go for it. If you don't have that capability, type it in the chat. Okay. What is the best way to bring leading up to your team? Good one. I actually just had this conversation today.
Well, there you go.
All right, go for it.
I honestly think it's the best thing to just be transparent, right? Like have those conversations about the tips that we just gave all of you, share those tips with your team. And I think that really helps you to stand out as a leader because so many of us, especially in revenue roles, are so focused on the numbers that sometimes we forget that there's more to that for the people who report into us. So in your next team meeting, screenshot that slide. I'm sure Rev Genius will be sending out the content, like steal it. And we're happy for you guys to borrow that slide of tips and tricks and just say, hey guys, like we're going into end of the year, right? I'm sure everyone has performance reviews coming up. This is a really great way for you to think about how to frame yours, right? Like here are 3 tips I'm giving you when you think about framing your performance review and how you're closing out the year to bring to me. And maybe it's things like promotion, but it doesn't have to be. It could be what you want to work on or what you're most proud of, right? So many of us just go through and check the box and forget, hey, I achieved something really big this year that was really important for my career. Like those wins, whether they're small or big, right? It could be, hey, I hit quota every quarter, or it could be, I learned a ton from Q1 where I didn't hit my goal to Q2. So I suggest like, again, pink elephant, call it out for your team. Hey guys, like we're about to hit end of year. It was a perfect time for me to remind you that like you're your biggest advocate and managing up to me is really important. Here are 3 tips that I would recommend you all follow. Just be ready because they're all going to take them. So those performance reviews will be, probably a little bit different than they have been in the past.
Yeah. And I think like for Tim as well, if he's a manager, and I want to say this to like all managers, we've talked a lot about like, how do you manage up? But it's also like for managers to be open and transparent about what they want, putting it out there, but also the managers adapting to the individuals on their team because they're different as well. And they need different managing or manager skills as well, I would say.
I don't have anything to add. I think that was great.
Yeah. The other thing that I think
any final questions? We've got one. Oh, go ahead.
I said the other thing I know we talked a little bit about flat organizations and someone did comment, I think Kate, let me make sure that they're in a Danish organization. I think flat organizations, sometimes we forget about that, or even like managing to your peers is important too. Like your manager needs to know everything you're doing, but like your peers are your cheerleaders. So don't forget them. I'm like full transparency, like this, moving into CRO, I had great peers and like people who advocated for me internally, which was amazing. So don't forget that too. I think we probably should have called this next time if we ever do this, like managing up and across, because I think both are equally as important.
Yeah. Okay, we need to wrap it up. We have 6 seconds.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll say if you want to talk to any of us, feel free to email us. It's our first name @salesscreen.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. And thanks so much for joining.